Hello, everyone. We're getting closer and closer here. We're up to now Mexico. So let's just get right into it, okay? Economically, Mexico is described as a developing country, but politically, it is considered a transitional democracy. The brief history here for Mexico: Mexico received independence from Spain in 1821, and then there was a Mexican Revolution in 1910 that gave the government legitimacy. Those of you who I taught APUS to, notice the restraint I am showing to not talk about the Texas War for Independence and the Mexican-American War. From 1929 to 2000, PRI was the dominant political party in Mexico. That's right, for over 70 years, one political party won every single presidential election and controlled the legislature, and we will get to that later. The history in Mexico, though, is marked by chaos and conflict and violence. Even as late as 1994, a presidential candidate was assassinated, Luis Donaldo Colosio. The government is considered legitimate, but there is, like I said, instability. So now, here is the structure of the government. Okay. Unlike our last one with China, I feel much stronger explaining this to you. So there are three branches, just like the US: executive, legislative, and judicial. But now here's where it changes. The president in Mexico is elected to a 1 6-year term. The current president is AMLO, or Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador. Now, there's one round of voting. Whoever gets the most votes is declared the winner, which means that you can, if you have three candidates, have a president without a majority. This is a plurality system. So please, again, remember 1 6-year term. Okay, the legislature, they call it the Congress of the Union. It is bicameral, just like the United States, meaning there's two parts. Mexico has a Senate and a Chamber of Deputies. So they did change the number of senators. It used to be 64, now it is 128. How do they come up with that number? There are 31 states in Mexico, plus the Federal District of Mexico City. Each of those 32 areas has 3 senators for a total of 96. So the top two vote getters, who wins them from the majority party, they will get those first 2 seats, and then whoever has the highest total from the minority party gets the third seat. So that is first past the post, or single member districts. But that's only for 96 of the senators. For the other 32, they use a proportional representation system. Nationwide, they will use PR. So, and you cannot serve consecutive terms in the Senate. Now you go to the Chamber of Deputies, which is similar to the U.S. House. There are 500 members, and they also have a dual or hybrid system of voting. So 300 of these people are elected in single member first past the post districts. The other 200 are using proportional representation. They have 3-year terms, and they are now, as of last year, allowed to seek a second term. And then the Supreme Court is the highest court in the land. It does have the power of judicial review, but almost never uses it. There are 11 judges, and they are appointed for 15-year terms. Okay, here are your 3 main political parties in Mexico. You have PRI, which is the more centrist, moderate, and, as some books said, opportunistic party. That is the one that dominated for 70 years. You have PRID, which is the more conservative, I apologize, the more liberal party. They are the ones that are promoting social justice and welfare programs, and they get much of their support from the South, which is the poorer region. And then PAN is the conservative party. That's the more business-oriented and pro-Catholic political party. They support more laissez-faire policies, and they get most of their support from the North. And there is one more political party that I should have mentioned, and that it's almost like the movies when they have, like, the cup is there and then it's not there in the next scene. You can see that I just stopped it here. This is Morena, or the National Regeneration Movement. This is actually the party of the current president, and it's really a coalition of a far-left pro-labor faction and a far-right faction, and I be honest, I don't know any more than that. This is obviously relatively new. I'm not sure if they'll ask you about it, but if they do, hopefully you just will be able to identify a significant shift that is taking place in Mexican politics. Okay. So we now go to some of the recent changes they've made. They did increase the number of senators from 64 to 128. As we said, PRI is no longer the dominant party. They used to have a practice called the Didazo, and that's when PRI dominated, where whoever the incumbent president was, he would basically handpick the next candidate who would then become the president. That is no longer with them, although some argued that Enrique Peña Nieto, who was president before AMLO, did attempt to bring it back. Of course, they'd have to win for it to actually take place. I think this is a big one for you. They have an Institute of Federal Elections. So they are going to be responsible for organizing all the elections, overseeing the elections, and look at some of the things that they do there. They do give all political parties media access. They limit how much money can be spent on campaigns. The candidates all get these funds. They even actually provide transportation to polling places for some people to vote in the election. So obviously that sounds incredibly democratic, and it is. But in addition, they also do provide people with a photo voting ID card. So some people in the United States wish we had something like that. And like I said, it is free. All right, here's another big one here. In 1991, priests were not allowed to vote. For all those years under priests were denied the right to vote. They changed that in 1991. There are also quotas for the number of female candidates that must be from each political party running. And as a result of that, in the most recent election, roughly half of Congress is female, and the mayor of Mexico City is also female. Overall, Mexico has seen a decline in voter fraud. There's greater transparency. All right, a lot on that slide, but I hope you're able to follow that. The north-south divide, I think, is pretty straightforward. North is more industrialized. Just think of it being closer to the United States. Wages are higher, more skilled workforce, better infrastructure. And then the South is where there are fewer jobs, lower wages, and less infrastructure. So therefore, the migration to Mexico always tends to go from the South to the North. All right. Economic policy. So a couple of terms here you should be familiar with. First, import substitute. I'll try that again. Import substitution industrialization policies. So this is basically when you support replacing foreign imports with producing goods within your country. And that is what Mexico has been trying to do for the last 20 or 30 years. Now, this coincides with the rise of globalization and the signing of NAFTA. NAFTA is the North American Free Trade Agreement. So they have really tried to move into like an economic liberalization model. There's a lot of factories in Mexico. As a result of all of these policies, some companies in the United States have actually moved to Mexico. It makes it a lot easier for them to produce goods and sell them for a profit. They have something, I don't know. Yeah, the maquiladoras. I wasn't sure if I put that in there. These are just factories that operate in Mexico, but they get this very special treatment of not having to pay tariffs, and they're basically 100% foreign owned. Now, there's a big debate in the United States about NAFTA, and there's a big debate in Mexico about NAFTA. And on the last slide, I'll mention how we're moving away from this agreement. Lastly, farmers are the ones that have suffered the most, as have the indigenous people, through all this economic liberalization. Okay, civil rights. The media has encouraged citizen participation and ensured fair elections, but the drug cartels are a major problem still in Mexico to the development of civil society. Civil unions are permitted in Mexico City. That was a few years ago. Overall, Mexico is either considered a liberal democracy or you can call it a developing democracy. And in the last slide, I just put a couple of different events that I think could help you to identify some of the key issues that Mexico is still dealing with in terms of conflict in the country. So the first one, we go back to 1968. I can't believe I have to pronounce this on tape. The Tlatelolco massacre. There were probably more than 100 people killed. I think the government only said it was 30 or 40. 1968 is when Mexico City was hosting the Olympics. And this happened a couple of weeks before the opening ceremonies. It was a terrible black eye for Mexico and obviously a horrific tragedy for the people involved. Now you go to 1994. and there's something called the Chiapas movement. That's one of the states in the very southern part of Mexico that has tried to break away. There's a group there called the Zapatistas, and they are absolutely disgusted with the economic impact of NAFTA. So as a result of that, the Zapatistas are getting more recognition, and the government is making an effort, although not much of one, to try to help the indigenous people. In 2006, there were teacher protests in another state in Mexico, and that led to a violent response from the military as well. Here's the one that I spent the most time talking to you about. In 2014, there was a bus of 43 future teachers who were actually going to honor that 1968 massacre. And they went missing. We have, I think, found some of their bodies, but they were all killed. And they have made arrests as a result of this, but it's really just an awful, awful recent tragedy in Mexico, which shows that there's still major trouble with corrupt police officers in the country. And then, as far as NAFTA, we're in the process of this, so I'm not sure how the test will deal with it. But the Trump administration is basically trying to renegotiate NAFTA, and it still hasn't been officially approved. But if it does, it'll be called United States Mexico Canada Agreement. Doesn't exactly roll off the tongue like NAFTA, but what would we say, USMCA, and that will probably happen in the next couple of months. And lastly, I think we all know that there is a major immigration debate at the border. You could clearly use that as an example for tensions and conflict that Mexico has. So I'm trying to keep this as brief and to the point as I can, and hopefully that one made sense for you. I got two more to go. It is Iran and Nigeria. Everybody have a nice day. Take care.